The day the sky betrayed humanity began like any other. The sun rose behind pale clouds, the streets filled with the hum of daily life, and children laughed as they chased each other on their way to school. Elias stood at his repair shop, adjusting the fine screws of a broken radio, when the first drops began to fall. At first, no one thought anything of it. Rain was a blessing, a relief after weeks of dry weather. People tilted their faces upward, smiling at the cool sensation on their skin. But within minutes, the smiles vanished. A woman standing by a fruit stand suddenly collapsed, her basket spilling apples into the gutter. A man rushed to help her, but as the rain touched his arm, he stumbled too, his body convulsing in unnatural spasms. The crowd froze in horror as one after another, people fell, their faces pale, their veins darkening as though poisoned from the inside. Panic erupted. The rain was no longer a gift from the heavens, it was death falling drop by drop. Elias's heart thundered in his chest. He didn't yet understand, but instinct screamed at him to run. He thought of his little sister, Lila, waiting at home. Without a second thought, he abandoned his shop and sprinted through the chaos. The streets had become a nightmare. Families screamed as they dragged children under makeshift coverings, others ran blindly through alleys, searching for shelter. The air was filled with the metallic scent of rain mixed with the sharp odor of fear. Elias skidded to a halt when he saw a man stumble into the open street, reaching for the sky as if begging for mercy, only to crumple lifeless into the streaming water. The image seared itself into Elias's mind forever. He shoved it away and pressed forward, his only thought of Lila. When he reached home, thunder rolled above, louder, closer, mocking every heartbeat. His mother, pale and frantic, shoved Lila into his arms. "Take her, run," she shouted, her voice breaking as the windows rattled with the storm. Elias wanted to protest, wanted to grab her too, but before he could, the roof groaned under the weight of water, and the infected rain poured in. His mother's last glance burned into his memory, fear and love intertwined, before he turned and bolted into the storm. He shielded Lila with his jacket, feeling droplets sizzle against the fabric, each one threatening to break through and touch their skin. Her small hands clung to his shirt, her sobs muffled against his chest. The streets were rivers now, bodies lying motionless in the current, and the sky was a cruel enemy. He ran until his lungs burned, until his legs screamed with pain. Then, through the blur of water and smoke, he saw it, the broken sign of an old library, half collapsed but still standing. At its side, a rusted iron hatch led downwards. People were already crowding toward it, desperate faces pushing, clawing, begging to escape the storm. Without thinking, Elias pushed forward, holding Lila tight. The hatch groaned open, and the underground swallowed them in darkness. The last thing Elias heard before the door slammed shut was the relentless pounding of the rain above, each drop a reminder that the world they once knew had ended forever. The bunker was not built to be a home, it was built to be a grave that delayed its closing. The moment Elias and Lila stumbled inside, the heavy iron hatch slammed shut, sealing them in a world of shadows. The air was damp, thick with the scent of rust, oil, and unwashed bodies. Narrow corridors stretched like veins through the underground, dimly lit by flickering bulbs that buzzed as if mocking the silence. Dozens of faces stared back at Elias as he clutched his sister. Some were hollow-eyed and trembling, others hardened and cold, but all carried the same haunted look, the mark of those who had seen the sky turn against them. Life inside settled into a suffocating rhythm. Rations were scarce, distributed with strict measures that left stomachs aching and mouths dry. A single stale piece of bread might be shared among three, and water was rationed like gold, each sip taken with gratitude and resentment. Nights stretched endlessly as the rain pounded above, its echo seeping through the earth, reminding everyone that death still waited just beyond the walls. People spoke in whispers, afraid that even their voices might attract the storm. Arguments flared over crumbs, over space, over silence itself, only to fizzle out into exhaustion. Survival was not noble here, it was raw, ugly, and desperate. Yet even in this hollow darkness, something fragile began to flicker. An elderly man with a trembling voice started telling stories to the children at night, his words weaving pictures of blue skies, gardens, and birdsong that none dared to hope for again. A woman tore her last piece of bread in half to give to a crying child not her own. Elias, with nothing but his hands and determination, began tinkering with the broken radios people had carried into the bunker. Most spat static, but sometimes, just sometimes, he caught faint voices, fragments of broadcasts, whispers of humanity beyond their walls. For a moment, the silence broke, and people leaned closer, their faces glowing with the fragile warmth of possibility. But beneath the fragile bonds of kindness, despair still stalked. Children whimpered in the night for parents who never made it inside. Men sat with heads buried in their hands, unable to shake the screams of those left behind in the rain. Elias lay awake most nights, Lila curled beside him, listening to her small breaths as though they were the only sound worth living for. He wondered if their mother had survived, if she was trapped somewhere else, or if the rain had already claimed her. Each unanswered question pressed down like the ceiling itself, yet the promise he made to Lila kept him from breaking. In that suffocating place, Elias realized something: survival was not only about food or water. It was about holding on to humanity when the world tried to strip it away. It was about protecting a little sister's smile, even when every reason to smile had been drowned by the storm. Hunger became a constant companion in the bunker, gnawing at bellies, draining strength, and eroding patience. What began as quiet endurance soon turned into restless whispers in the dark. How long could they last on scraps? The rations dwindled day by day, until children's ribs began to show, and their cries pierced through the damp silence of the underground. Elias felt it most when he looked at Lila, her once bright eyes dulled with exhaustion, her small frame shrinking beneath his protective arms. He hated the way she tried to smile to reassure him, even as her stomach growled. It was then that Elias realized hunger was not just a physical ache, it was a slow death that stole hope first. The tension in the bunker built until a group of men whispered plans of venturing outside. It was madness, everyone said, the rain never truly stopped, and stepping into it was as good as stepping into a grave. Yet desperation has a way of silencing reason. When the group prepared to go, Elias surprised even himself by volunteering. He saw the disbelief in their eyes, but he could not let Lila waste away while he did nothing. He wrapped her in his arms that night, whispering a promise he wasn't sure he could keep: "I'll bring you something. I swear." The world outside was no longer familiar. When the heavy hatch groaned open, a cold gust of air swept in, carrying the acrid scent of rotten abandonment. The streets, once filled with laughter and life, now stood empty, littered with rusting cars and collapsed roofs. Windows were shattered, doors broken open, as though the storm itself had torn the soul from the city. Elias and the others wrapped themselves in plastic sheets, clutching makeshift coverings, every droplet of water above them a loaded gun waiting to fall. Their footsteps echoed in the silence, each one a reminder that death watched them from the sky. They reached a crumbling store, its shelves mostly bare, but even scraps were treasures now. Cans dented with age, dusty bottles, stale crackers, their hands shook as they filled their bags, as if clutching life itself. For a fleeting moment, hope swelled in their chests. But then the sky answered with a low, rolling growl of thunder. Elias's blood turned to ice. He looked up through the shattered roof and saw it, the first drop falling. The scramble that followed was chaos. Feet pounded the ground, bags clutched to chests, hearts racing faster than the storm itself. One man slipped, a scream tearing from his throat as the rain splashed across his skin. Elias saw the infection take him in seconds, his body writhing, his voice fading into nothing. Guilt and terror slammed into Elias, but he forced his legs to move, clutching the bag as though Lila's life was sewn into it. The storm chased them all the way back, pounding the earth, threatening to claim them too. When the bunker door slammed shut behind him, Elias collapsed onto the floor, soaked with sweat and fear. That night, when he placed a piece of bread into Lila's trembling hands, her eyes lit with gratitude brighter than any sun he could remember. The victory was small, but in that moment, it was everything. Yet deep in his chest, the screams of the man lost outside echoed, reminding him that every choice in this new world was a bargain with death. The bunker welcomed Elias and the others back with a heavy silence that felt almost judgmental. Survivors rushed to grab the food, hands trembling as though salvation itself had returned, yet the faces of those who came back were pale, haunted. Everyone noticed there were fewer than before. The name of the man who had fallen in the rain was not spoken aloud, but it lingered in the air like a ghost. Elias could not shake it. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the man's body twisting in agony, heard his scream echoing in the hollow streets. Though he had brought food for his sister, guilt gnawed at him just as deeply as hunger ever had. At night, as the bunker settled into uneasy rest, Elias lay awake with Lila curled against him. She ate the bread he gave her with trembling hands, whispering thank you through tired lips, but her gratitude did not erase the image in his mind. He had survived while another had not, and though reason told him it was not his fault, his heart felt otherwise. He questioned what survival meant in this new world. Was it simply the act of breathing, of enduring one more day, or was there something more? If living came at the cost of watching others fall, could it truly be called living at all? The days passed, and hunger eased slightly with the food they had scavenged, but despair remained. Some men grew bitter, their voices rising in angry accusations that they should risk the outside more often, that fear was killing them faster than the rain. Others withdrew into silence, their eyes vacant, their hope drained. Yet amid the shadows, Elias began to notice something unexpected. A child laughed one evening at a story the old man told by candlelight, her giggle piercing through the gloom like sunlight in a cave. A young woman sang softly to lull her baby to sleep, her voice trembling but beautiful, and for a brief moment the bunker was quiet, listening to a lullaby of resilience. Elias found himself drawn to these fragile moments, realizing that while food and water kept bodies alive, it was kindness that kept souls from breaking. He began fixing more than just radios. He repaired broken lanterns, patched torn coats, even mended small toys for the children. Each task was tiny, insignificant in the face of the endless storm above, yet the smiles he saw reminded him that humanity was not yet defeated. People began to look at him not just as another survivor, but as someone who refused to surrender to despair. Still, every act of kindness was balanced by the weight of his private torment. Each time a child laughed, Elias remembered the man's scream. Each time his sister smiled with a full stomach, he remembered another family grieving for their loss. Yet over time, he came to understand that grief and hope were not enemies, they walked hand in hand. Survival was not a choice between despair and joy, but the courage to carry both, to live with the burden of loss while still choosing to create moments of light. It was in this understanding that Elias began to change. He no longer saw himself as a boy hiding underground but as a guardian of what humanity still had left. Protecting Lila was still his purpose, but now he carried the weight of others too, their laughter, their hope, their fragile humanity. In the bunker, beneath the endless storm, he realized that survival meant more than enduring. It meant remembering why life was worth saving. It began with silence. For months, the bunker had lived to the constant rhythm of the storm above, raindrops pounding like drums of doom, thunder rolling like a voice that never let them forget what awaited outside. But one morning, Elias awoke to an absence so profound it made his heart race. There was no pounding, no rumbling, only stillness. At first, he thought it was a trick of his imagination, a dream born from exhaustion. But as he sat up, he saw others stirring too, eyes wide, listening to the impossible quiet. For the first time in what felt like years, the rain had stopped. At first, no one dared to believe it. Whispers ran through the bunker, cautious, fearful. It could be a pause, someone said. The storm will come back. But hours passed, and the silence held. The leaders debated furiously, torn between fear and hope. The hatch was their lifeline, but it was also their cage. To open it could mean freedom, or death. As the arguments dragged on, Elias looked at Lila. She stood at the edge of the crowd, her thin hands gripping the wall, her eyes reflecting a longing he had not seen in years. A longing for sunlight, for fresh air, for the sky she barely remembered. In that moment, Elias knew that staying hidden was no longer living. They had survived long enough to deserve more than shadows. When the hatch was finally unsealed, the sound of iron scraping against iron echoed like the tearing of chains. Light poured in, real light, golden and pure, flooding the underground with brilliance that blinded them. People shielded their eyes, some weeping before they even stepped outside. Elias held Lila's hand tightly as they climbed upward, his heart beating with fear and awe. The first breath of open air struck him like a miracle. It was crisp, cool, untouched by poison. The wind brushed his face gently, carrying not the stench of rot but the sweetness of earth renewed. Above them, the sky stretched endlessly, blue and vast, as though it had never betrayed them at all. Around him, people fell to their knees, kissing the ground, their sobs echoing with relief. Children laughed, their voices ringing with a freedom they had nearly forgotten. For the first time, the sound of joy was louder than the memory of rain. Elias lifted his face to the sun, his eyes stinging with tears. He had carried guilt, despair, and loss like shackles, but in this moment, the weight fell away. The storm had not taken everything, it had revealed what could never be drowned. Humanity had survived, not because of walls or rations, but because of love, sacrifice, and kindness in the darkest of times. Elias turned to Lila, her face glowing in the sunlight. She smiled at him, the same smile that had kept him fighting when everything seemed lost. In her eyes, he saw not just survival, but the promise of a future. Together, they stepped forward into a world reborn. The rain had tried to end them, but instead it had taught them what truly mattered. The storm was over, but the strength it had forged in their hearts would last forever. If this story moved you, please share it, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks for more stories of love, redemption, and hope.